Hello! I'm super excited to start this course with you, but as always, before we do, we need to see where we're starting and where we're ending up so we have a clear path to succeeding. So let's see what this course will look like for you. We're first going to start off with creating our hacking lab. Now don't worry, whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you're going to be able to follow, because what we'll do is use something called a virtual machine to install Kali Linux, which is often used with ethical hacking, onto our machine so that we can simulate and create our hacking environment. Don't worry, all the tools we're going to use is free, and you're going to be able to set up your computer in a way to follow the rest of the course. And you're also going to have a professional setup. We're also going to cover some basics on hacking, some fundamentals and principles that's going to set us up for success later on in the course. Then we have an optional part. For those that really want to get into programming as well and possibly programming some of our projects later on in the course, we're going to teach you Python from scratch, or Python already as a refresher, so that you can also learn an extra pair of skill set for some harder projects that we have in the course. Then we get into the fun part. And the first step we're going to dive into after we have our hacking lab and some of our programming skills sharp is reconnaissance. Here is where we learn what we call footprinting, or in other words, information gathering. Once we choose our target, our first task is to gain as much information about the target as possible. We're going to talk about IP addresses, about the Whois tool, the WhatWeb stealth scan, finding usernames, building an email scraper tool, and other tools available to us to gather as much information as possible. From there, we go into scanning, and this is where things get real. In this section, we gather information on some of the technical information that we can acquire from a target. For example, if they have open ports, if they have a firewall, what software they're running on these ports, and if they have any outdated operating systems. And don't worry, if you don't know what any of this means, we take you from scratch and you're going to learn it all. Here is where we learn about TCP, UDP, using the powerful Nmap tool, different types of scans that we can do, how to work with firewalls, using decoys and packet fragmentation. And we're also going to build a Portscanner project in this section. From there, we go into vulnerability analysis. In this section, we use the information that we gathered from the previous sections, and with this information, we try to determine whether there is a known vulnerability that we can take a vulnerability and show how we can break into it and how we can use that to our advantage. Then, well, this is the exciting part. This is the big part of the course. This is where we attack and gain access to the target machines. And throughout this section, we'll be covering many different vulnerabilities and different targets. We perform different sorts of attacks on virtual machines and cover a very important tool of an ethical hacker, that is the Metasploit framework. The goal of exploitation is to get on a target machine. So this means we must drop a payload on that target machine so we can use it to navigate through their systems, look through their files, execute anything we want, even delete anything we want without the target knowing anything about it. We'll learn to create our own viruses and Trojans that we can deliver to the target, whether through an email or through a USB. This is a big section, and we're going to dive into the weeds, try out these techniques, and learn how to defend against them. After that, we have what we call the post-exploitation. This, as the name suggests, is what we do after we exploit a target. Since we're on that machine, we can do many things depending on what we want to get out from it. At the end, after we do all the things we wanted by exploiting the target, we want to make sure we cover our tracks by deleting any event logs or deleting any evidence that we were ever on that machine. We're going to learn lots of things here, such as creating persistence on a target machine and even creating a backdoor in one of our projects. We then get into a very important part that a lot of you might find very, very interesting, and that is website penetration testing. This is a big topic for an ethical hacker, and in this section, we're mainly targeting websites and their bugs and vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities can be anything from misconfigurations, SQL injections, information disclosures, command ejections, cross-site scripting attacks, And we're also going to code our own and create our own project, a login brute force script, and also a directory discovery tool. Again, in this section, you're going to learn how to use these techniques and therefore defend against them on your own website or a client's website. Then we get into something that you have to know as an ethical hacker. It's the man-in-the-middle attack. This is an attack that is used inside a network, and this allows us to sniff any unencrypted data and see it in plain text. So we could use this technique to see passwords for some websites. And we're going to cover some of the main tools that hackers use when doing a man-in-the-middle attack. We then have a bonus section on Wi-Fi and wireless cracking. This is the section where we want to gain access to a network by cracking its wireless password. And we're going to talk about things like aircrack password cracking and hashcat password cracking, and show you how you might use this and how attackers might use this on your wireless network. Now, we got lots to cover. Hello! I'm super excited to start this course with you, but as always, before we do, we need to see where we're starting and where we're ending up so we have a clear path to succeeding. So let's see what this course will look like for you. We're first going to start off with creating our hacking lab. Now don't worry, whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you're going to be able to follow, because what we'll do is use something called a virtual machine to install Kali Linux, which is often used with ethical hacking, onto our machine so that we can simulate and create our hacking environment. Don't worry, all the tools we're going to use is free, and you're going to be able to set up your computer in a way to follow the rest of the course. And you're also going to have a professional setup. We're also going to cover some basics on hacking, some fundamentals and principles that's going to set us up for success later on in the course. Then we have an optional part. For those that really want to get into programming as well, and possibly programming some of our projects later on in the course, we're going to teach you Python from scratch, or if you know Python already, as a refresher, so that you can also learn an extra pair of skill set for some harder projects that we have in the course. Then we get into the fun part. And the first step we're going to dive into after we have our hacking lab and some of our programming skills sharp is reconnaissance. Here is where we learn what we call footprinting, or in other words, information gathering. Once we choose our target, our first task is to gain as much information about the target as possible. We're going to talk about IP addresses, about the Whois tool, the WhatWeb stealth scan, finding usernames, building an email scraper tool, and other tools available to us to gather as much information as possible. From there, we go into scanning, and this is where things get real. In this section, we gather information on some of the technical information that we can acquire from a target. For example, if they have open ports, if they have a firewall, what software they're running on these ports, and if they have any outdated operating systems. And don't worry, if you don't know what any of this means, we take you from scratch and you're going to learn it all. Here is where we learn about TCP, UDP, using the powerful Nmap tool, different types of scans that we can do, how to work with firewalls, using decoys and packet fragmentation. And we're also going to build a Portscanner project in this section. From there, we go into vulnerability analysis. In this section, we use the information that we gathered from the previous sections, and with this information, we try to determine whether there is a known vulnerability that we can take advantage of. We're going to use different sorts of tools to learn about our target system and where their weaknesses are. We're actually going to work on a Windows 7 machine that has a vulnerability and show how we can break into it and how we can use that to our advantage. Then, well, this is the exciting part. This is the big part of the course. This is where we attack and gain access to the target machines. And throughout this session, we'll be covering many different vulnerabilities and different targets. We perform different sorts of attacks on virtual machines and cover a very important tool of an ethical hacker, that is the Metasploit framework. The goal of exploitation is to get on a target machine. So this means we must drop a payload on that target machine so we can use it to navigate through their systems, look through their files, execute anything we want, even delete anything we want without the target knowing anything about it. We'll learn to create our own viruses and Trojans that we can deliver to the target, whether through an email or through a USB. This is a big section, and we're going to dive into the weeds, try out these techniques, and learn how to defend against them. After that, we have what we call the post-exploitation. This, as the name suggests, is what we do after we exploit a target. Since we're on that machine, we can do many things depending on what we want to get out from it. At the end, after we do all the things we wanted by exploiting the target, we want to make sure we cover our tracks by deleting any event logs or deleting any evidence that we were ever on that machine. We're going to learn lots of things here, such as creating persistence on a target machine and even creating a backdoor in one of our projects. We then get into a very important part that a lot of you might find very, very interesting, and that is website penetration testing. This is a big topic for an ethical hacker, and in this section, we're mainly targeting websites and their bugs and vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities can be anything from misconfigurations, SQL injections, information disclosures, command ejections, cross-site scripting attacks. And we're also going to code our own and create our own project, a login brute force script, and also a directory discovery tool. Again, in this section, you're going to learn how to use these techniques and therefore defend against them on your own website or a client's website. Then we get into something that you have to know as an ethical hacker. It's the man-in-the-middle attack. This is an attack that is used inside a network, and this allows us to sniff any unencrypted data and see it in plain text. So we could use this technique to see passwords for some websites. And we're going to cover some of the main tools that hackers use when doing a man-in-the-middle attack. We then have a bonus section on Wi-Fi and wireless cracking. This is the section where we want to gain access to a network by cracking its wireless password. And we're going to talk about things like aircrack password cracking and hashcat password cracking, and show you how you might use this and how attackers might use this on your wireless network. Now, we got lots to cover, but I also want to talk about the best part right here. Our online private community of over 300,000 students. We have people chatting here every day, helping each other out to finish the course, doing challenges together, and talking about the latest and greatest in technology. This is an optional resource for you to use so you can have back and forth conversation with other students and myself so you feel like you're part of a real classroom. But you know what? Enough talk. I know you're getting excited. I am too. So let's get started and let's learn ethical hacking.
Okay, so what is a virtual machine? This is something that I mentioned in the previous video, but it is important for us to fully understand what it is. I can just give you a definition and say virtual machine is a machine within our physical computer that is using its hardware resources. But for most of you, this will be a new term that you haven't really encountered before. So I would like to explain it furthermore for you, as well as mention why are we going to use it. Let me start like this. All of us are running an operating system, and 99.9% of us are running one of the three main operating systems. You either have Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. Most of you will have Windows or Mac OS. I doubt anyone will be running Linux, but nonetheless, these are the three main ones. But what if we wanted to run two different operating systems on the same machine? Can we do that? For example, let's say you have Windows installed on your physical machine, but you want to install Linux too. Or even better case, you want to install 5 operating systems running on different virtual machines. Can you do that? You can. How would that work? Well, it's 4 lines representing our computer. And we already know that any computer will have one of the 3 main operating systems: Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. But operating system is not the only thing defining our machine. Our machine also has its computer parts. We have hard disk, processor, RAM memory, motherboard, and many more computer parts that with the operating system make our machine work. These computer parts are also known as hardware. But wait a second, Alexa. Why are you telling us this? Thought this was a lecture on explaining how virtual machines work, and not on hardware components. Well, hang on for just a second. We're slowly getting there. Picture a virtual machine to be this smaller rectangle within our physical machine, which is this larger rectangle. And let's imagine that our physical machine is running Windows operating system. But if you took a look at this course content, you would probably notice that we're going to be doing all of our hacking stuff over Linux. Does that mean that we must delete our Windows and install Linux? Nope. We will install Linux as a virtual machine. And for this machine to work, it will need to have access to our hardware components. What does this mean? Well, since virtual machine will act as a machine of its own, it must have its own computer parts. And what we will do is we're going to borrow our physical machine's CPU power, RAM memory, hard disk memory to our virtual machine so it can run just like our physical machine. In other words, we're splitting the power of our physical machine into two different machines, or more, if we decide that we want to create multiple virtual machines. Does that mean that they will be slower since they will be splitting hardware resources? Well, technically yes, but it will not be noticeable for us. However, the more powerful your PC is, more virtual machines it will be able to run effectively. Another important thing is that once you shut down your virtual machine, all of the hardware resources used by it will get freed back for your physical machine to use. Okay, good, but what are other benefits that we have if we create a virtual machine? Well, since we're hackers and we will be doing a lot of things and running a lot of programs on that virtual machine, we want to make sure that we're doing it first in a safe environment, at least while we learn. The good thing about virtual machines is that if, for example, our machine starts getting some annoying error, or we get locked out of our files, or simply we delete a file that we shouldn't have deleted and it crashes our virtual machine. But what if we, for example, get infected by a malware or virus by accident? Or we simply just install the wrong version of operating system, which we don't need. Don't worry, with 2 clicks, we can delete the entire virtual machine with all of its files and it will have no effect on our physical machine. Then we can proceed to create a new one for as many times as we want. We can also create something called a snapshot, which will allow us to save the current state of a virtual machine, and with it, we can revert it back to that state whenever we want. This could be used if we, for example, run into some errors with our virtual machine. Sounds cool, right? Now that we know how virtual machines work and why are we going to use one, you must be wondering how can we create a virtual machine? Actually, this is pretty easy. All we need are 2 things. We need an operating system that we want to install in that virtual machine, and we also need something called virtualization software. Now, what is this? Even though it sounds harsh saying virtualization software, what it essentially is a program that will allow our physical machine to borrow hardware components to our virtual machine. Or we can also define it as a program that will allow us to run multiple operating systems on a single host or a single machine. So with these 2 combined, we can create our virtual machine, and in the next few lectures, we're going to see exactly how to do that. See you there. Before we actually proceed to creating our virtual machine that we will use for hacking, I believe most of you are wondering, why Linux? Why are we installing a Linux operating system on a virtual machine? Can't we hack using Windows or Mac OS? Well, yes we can, but Linux is something far better for that. So, what are the benefits of using Linux? First thing that's great about Linux is that it is an open source operating system. This means that we can inspect the code of it and see how it is made and what programs or functions it runs. It can be used for any type of work, not only for hacking. Many programmers also use Linux. Many servers all around the world are running on Linux. And another great thing about it is that most of the Linux distros are free of cost. Maybe some of you have heard about Ubuntu, Linux Mint, or Debian. Well, to use an updated Windows operating system, you must pay for a license. Linux, on the other hand, is free to download for anyone. And not only that, but it also, due to it being an open source, it allows the users of Linux to edit, copy, or distribute various aspects of Linux-based operating system without violating any copyright law or terms and conditions. This is one of the main reasons hackers use Linux, because they can easily develop softwares used for hacking and penetration testing on Linux, and they can change and edit the operating system for their needs. It is also very light, requires lesser disk space, consumes lesser RAM in order to run, so it can be easily ran alongside any other operating system like Windows and macOS. And last but not least is that, as we mentioned, due to Linux being an open source and allowing anyone to change and interact with the operating system, it allows people to create an operating system that will specifically be made for one purpose, such as, for example, ethical hacking or penetration testing. And Linux distros like this already exist. There are Linux distros called Kali Linux, Parrot, Backtrack, and others that are especially made for penetration testing and checking for security loopholes. And all of them are widely being used by hackers. And in this course, we will be using Kali Linux, one of the Linux distros specially created for hackers and penetration testers. What's great about it is that it automatically comes after installation with a bunch of different tools used by penetration testers for hacking. And we're going to cover those tools and go step by step through them, plus we'll be installing tools created by other people, and at the advanced parts of this course, we'll be creating our own hacking tools. How cool will that be? So now that we know exactly which Linux distro are we going to install and what are the benefits of using Linux, in the next video we can create our virtual hacking lab. Hello and welcome back. So in the previous few lectures we talked about virtual machines and why we need them for this course. We also mentioned that for creating our virtual hacking lab, we will need a virtualization software as well as an operating system that is used for hacking, which is also known as Kali Linux. Now, let's see where we can download both of these. So, let's start off with the virtualization software. For this course, we will be using VirtualBox. Now, VirtualBox is a free virtualization software, and it is quite easy to use, and it's compatible with almost all the operating systems. All you have to do is type in VirtualBox in your search bar, and the first link, which will be virtualbox.org, is the one that we're looking for. So just click on this, Oracle VM VirtualBox, at virtualbox.org, and it will lead us to the official page of VirtualBox, where we will see this big download button that allows us to download this virtualization software. So once we click on it, it will lead us to this page where we can choose which platform packages, or in other words, which version of VirtualBox we want to download. Now, these are different versions depending on which operating system you are running. So if you are running Windows, you want to go with Windows hosts. If you're running OS X, you want to go with OS X hosts. If you're on Linux, then you want to go to Linux distributions, and so on and so on. Now, since I'm on Windows, I will be clicking Windows hosts, and this will ask where to download this VirtualBox installation file for our virtualization software. Now, I already have it, so I won't be downloading it, but you want to save it wherever you want. So just save it on your desktop, and once you do that, let's move on to downloading Kali Linux. We can find Kali Linux at kali.org website, which you can just type in your search bar, or you can just type Kali Linux, and the first link should open this page. As we can see, it says the most advanced penetration testing distribution, and we get a small description of what Kali Linux is. So let's quickly read it. Kali Linux is an open source Debian-based Linux distribution geared towards various information security tasks such as penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. Okay, awesome. To download it, we want to go to either Get Kali or on Download. Once we click on download, it will lead us to this page where we will have several different versions of Kali Linux available for download. Now, we want to go with installer images. We can also go with virtual machines, but to have it exactly as we do in the course, we want to go with the installer images as our option. So click on installer images, and down here we will see the current version of Kali Linux, which is 2022.3, and it will give us several different options from what we can download. So we have 64-bit, 32-bit, and for the Apple Silicon, M1 and M2 chips. Okay, so depending on what your architecture and operating system is, you want to choose accordingly. Now, since I'm running a 64-bit machine, I want to check right here 64-bit, and I want to choose this installer option. So 64-bit, installer, and all I have to do is click it, and it should work. It will ask me where I want to download. Now, once again, I already have Kali Linux downloaded right here, so it's on my desktop. No need to download it twice. For you, just save it on your desktop as you did with your VirtualBox installation file, and you should be good to go. Now, if you're by any chance on a 32-bit machine, you want to select 32-bit and go once again with the installer, or if you are on M1 chip or M2 chip on MacBook, then you want to select Apple Silicon and proceed with the installer. However, if you are on Intel Mac, or if your MacBook doesn't have an M1 or M2 chip, but rather has an Intel processor, then you want to once again go with 64-bit, just like I did. Now, quick little note for anyone using Apple Silicon M1 or M2 chip, VirtualBox will not work for you, so for you instead, you want to go with UTM. Now, UTM is only for the people that are using a MacBook with M1 or M2 chip. If you're using any other device, you're going with VirtualBox. And one more thing, this is the current version of Kali as we already mentioned, but in case you want to download any older version, you can go to old.kali.org, base images, and here you will have all the versions that were released before. In this particular course, we are using the 2020 version, but it doesn't really matter. I do advise you to download the latest version of Kali Linux whenever you can. So if at the point of you watching this tutorial it's 2022.3, go with that version. If there is a newer version available, go with the newest version instead. Nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so here we are. We are ready with both of our files on our desktop. The first thing that we want to do is we want to install VirtualBox software. In order to create virtual machine, we must first have the software installed, so let us do that first. If we double click on it, it will start the process of installation, which should look the same whether you're running Windows, Mac OS or Linux. The process of installation VirtualBox will be the same. And it is rather easy, since all we want to do is we want to click on next on each and every step, but just so we don't go next, let us explain what you can do with each and every step of installation. So here, as it says under the custom setup, we want to select the way we want our features to be installed. And the only thing that you might consider changing right here is this location part. If you want to change the location of VirtualBox, you can do that right here, but since I won't be doing that, I will just click on next to proceed to the next step. Here you can select whether you want a shortcut on the desktop, whether you want start menu entries. I will leave all of this to be checked since I want all of that, and I will click on next step. For this step, it says that during the installation we might be disconnected from the internet in case you're downloading or uploading something important, so best thing you can do in that case is wait for that download or upload to finish, and then you can proceed with the installation of VirtualBox. So I will just click on yes, since I'm not doing anything important over the internet, and I will click right here on install. This will ask me for my administrative password, and since I don't have one, I will simply just click on yes, and it will start the process of installing VirtualBox. This will finish in just a few seconds, and right after it, it should open up our VirtualBox. So just at this last step after installation, we want to click on Finish. And in just a few seconds, this should open the VirtualBox. And here it is. So your Windows should look exactly like mine does, and what we want to do from here is we want to create the virtual machine. We're going to go onto this New button and click on it, which will open this small window that will ask us for some information about our virtual machine. So under the name, we're going to specify Kali Linux, and you can name it anything you want. It doesn't have to be Kali Linux, but just in case you might have multiple machines in VirtualBox later on, you want to have them named properly so you know which machine is which. Next thing, the machine folder is something that we don't want to change. The type we want to set on Linux, and you will notice if you typed Kali Linux, it should automatically set the type to be Linux. And the version is something that we do want to change. Now, since Kali Linux is a Debian-based operating system, we want to be searching Debian right here. And here it is. We got Debian 32-bit and Debian 64-bit. If you downloaded the 64-bit version of Kali Linux, you want to select right here Debian 64-bit. And if you downloaded the 32-bit one, you would be selecting Debian 32-bit. After we got all of these options set like this, we want to click on Next. And this next step is, if you remember, we talked about that we need to give our hardware resources to our virtual machine. And right here it asks us how much RAM memory are we willing to borrow to the virtual machine to use. This RAM memory will not be available as long as our virtual machine is running, and once the virtual machine has been shut down, this RAM memory will be freed for our physical machine to use. Now, on this machine that I'm recording, I have 8 GB of RAM. So, in the best case, I want to give about 2 GB of RAM to this virtual machine. Now I can also go up to 4 GB of RAM, but it is not really needed, and there is no point in giving half of your RAM memory to your virtual machine. So 2 GB of RAM will be more than enough for my virtual machine. If your machine has 16 GB of RAM or 32 GB of RAM, feel free to give it even more RAM memory, as the more the better. And if your machine has less than 8 GB of RAM, for example it has 4 GB of RAM, then you can either go with 2 GB or you can even lower it to 1 GB of RAM. But I will simply just leave it on 2, and I will proceed to the next step. In the next step, we are creating the hard disk, so we want to select this option that says create a virtual hard disk now, and keep in mind that the recommended size of the hard disk is 8 GB. This option will come later on, but just keep it in mind. So create a virtual hard disk now, click on create, and under the hard disk file type, we want to select VirtualBox disk image. Click on next. This next question is asking us how we want to store our data on our virtual hard disk, whether we want fixed size or dynamically allocated. Keep in mind that fixed size will probably work faster, but it will also take longer time to create, while the dynamically allocated might work a little bit slower, but it will be created a lot faster. It is completely up to you. In this case, I will simply just go with dynamically allocated, and I will click on next. And here is where we choose the virtual hard disk size and the file location. So here you can change the location of your virtual hard disk, or simply of your virtual machine. And down here, you can select how much gigabytes you want to give to your virtual machine to use as a hard disk. It said before that 8 GB is recommended, but I would advise you to not go below 20 GB. For the purposes of this course, I will even go up to 30 GB, but you don't really have to if you don't want. Just keep in mind that you might be using this machine later on, even after this course, and you might be downloading more and more files, so if you can, make sure to give it more than it is recommended. Once you select your hard disk size, you want to click on Create. And this will create our virtual machine. As you can see right here, we got Kali Linux added, and here are all of the details about our virtual machine. Before we proceed and start it, there is only one more thing that we want to do. Remember this ISO image, or this operating system? We need to somehow add it to our virtual machine, so that once we install the operating system, it knows which one to install. So to do that, we navigate back to VirtualBox, we select the virtual machine, and we click on Settings. Now you will notice that there are a bunch of settings right here, which we are going to explain later on, but for now on, you want to navigate to the storage, and here is where we want to add our ISO image of Kali Linux. To do that, we want to go to this controller IDE, and this empty part, we want to right-click and remove attachment. It will ask us, are we sure that we want to delete it? We click on remove, and after it, we want to click on this disk shape with a plus. Just click on it, and it will open up this smaller window where we want to find our Kali Linux ISO image and select it. In case you don't see it right here, you want to click on Add, and you can simply just find it on your machine. In my case, as we can see, it is right here in the download section, but in your case, if you moved it to a desktop, it will probably be on desktop as well. Since I have it in both locations, I will select the desktop one, double click it, and you will see it being added right here. Then you select it here, and click on Choose. You should see it being added right here under the controller IDE, as it says Kali Linux 2020.2. And once you see it, you can simply just click on OK. And now our virtual machine is fully created. All we are left to do in the next video is to install the Kali Linux operating system. After that, we're going to be ready to use our hacking machine. Okay, finally, we got to the part where we will install our machine with all the interesting hacking tools that we will use. Hopefully, you're excited since by the end of this video, you will have your Kali Linux machine running and ready to use. Here in our VirtualBox, in order to start the process of installation, we must first select our virtual machine and then click on this Start button right here. This will start our virtual machine and it will start the process of installation of operating system. Okay, so let me enlarge this, even though the screen of the installation will stay smaller size, but that is just during the installation, so don't worry. And right here in the installer menu, we're interested in two different options, either graphical install or install. They're pretty much the same, just graphical install is prettier, so that's why we're going to go with that one. Click here Enter. The next thing it asks us is to choose the language, and for the purposes of this course, I will proceed with English, and you can pick whichever language you want. So just select whichever language you want. I will select English and I will click on Continue. In the location part, this is only important if you want to have the correct time zone correspondent with your country. And right here, it also tells us that these countries from which we can choose are strictly based on the language that we picked in the previous step. So in case your country is not on the list, like mine isn't, you can go right here on Other and select your country. If it is on the list, select it and click on Continue. Now, since this really isn't that important step, I will just proceed with the United States. And here under the configuration of the keyboard, I will select American English and I will click on Continue. After setting up our keyboard, the installation process will configure some stuff required for our machine to run, and you will notice most of the stuff is done automatically, so we don't need to worry about it too much. Whenever a certain question pops up, I will tell you what you need to select to proceed to the next step of installation. Okay, so after a few seconds, here is the first question. Let us read what it wants from us. So it says, please enter the hostname for this system, and the hostname is a single word that identifies your system to the network. If you don't know what your hostname should be, consult your network administrator. If you're setting up your own home network, you can make something up here. Okay, so we're not network administrators, therefore we can just make something up as a hostname, so let us just go with Kali. Why not? And let us go on Continue. Domain name, this is something that we want to leave empty, so just delete everything right here and proceed to the next step. Okay, so we got setup users and password step. Now, in the previous versions of Kali Linux, it usually asked you to set up the password for the root account. And unlike, for example, on Windows, we got the user accounts and administrator, on Linux, we got the user accounts and a root account. What a root account is basically the same as an administrator in Windows. It has elevated privileges, it can execute commands that user's account cannot execute, and in this newest version of Kali Linux, we are required to set up a user account. So here we got the step where we need to specify full name for the new user, and it tells us that specifying our full name would be a reasonable choice. And if it was any other course instead of a hacking course, I would also tell you to specify your name here. But I must teach you to also think like a hacker. And we hackers want to stay as low-key as possible, so specifying our real name is not an option for us here. We can just make something up instead. Let us go with Mr. Hacker. Why not? Let's click on continue, and the username we can also leave to be Mr. Hacker. There's nothing really to change here. Of course, if you want, you can specify something other than Mr. Hacker. It is completely up to you. Just make sure you remember the username, since you will need it to log into your machine after the installation. So I will leave it on Mr. Hacker and click on continue. And here is a step where we need to choose a password. Now, password is the important stuff. We must make sure we choose a strong password for any type of account we create. Let me tell you one interesting fact. A lot of black hat hackers were caught because they had a weak password. We are white hat hackers, but it is still a good practice to always choose a long and strong password. So let us do it. I will type mine right here. And re-enter the password. I will type it once again. You can choose any password that you want. In case you want to make sure that you typed what you wanted to type, you can click right here, Show Password in Clear. As well as in the second step, you can also check Show Password in Clear. And after you choose your password, you can click on Continue. So here, configure the clock. You can select your time zone. I will go with Eastern. And here, after loading a few more additional components, it should ask us about disk partitioning. Here in the partitioning disk, we have a few options, and we're interested in the first one, which is guided to use entire disk. We're not really interested in encrypted hard disks or anything like that, so just select Use Entire Disk and click on Continue. Here we get a warning that all data on the disk you select will be erased. And this right here is a hard disk that we created in the previous video when I created my virtual machine. And you remember that I gave around 30 gigabytes to my virtual hard disk. So this is that one. And I will select it and click on Continue. Here it gives us some of the options as to how the disk can be partitioned. We will proceed with first option, which is all files in one partition, which is also recommended for new users. Don't worry about these other two options which mention /home, /var, /tmp. These are all just standard Linux directories, which we will see shortly after installation. So just click right here, all files in one partition, click on Continue. The final steps are finish partitioning and write changes to the disk. We want to click on Continue there as well. And right here it will just ask us, are we sure that we want to write the changes to the disk? We want to select right here, yes, and we want to click on Continue. So after clicking on Continue, the installation process will start and it will take some time. It can take possibly around 20 to 30 minutes, maybe even longer, and it will also ask us a couple more questions in meantime. I will fast forward to the first question that pops up, and you just pause the video until you get to that step of installation. Okay, so here is the next question, configuring the package manager, and it asks us for the HTTP proxy information. Leave blank for none, and we do want to leave blank, so we're not going to type anything here, and we're going to click on Continue. Here in the software selection, we want to leave all of the checked things, and we also want to add the large option. So leave everything checked that you see right here and click right here on large. What this will do is it will install additional tools in our Kali Linux, and we want as many hacking tools installed with our operating system so we don't have to waste time installing them later on. So just double check that all of these options are checked: desktop environment, XFCE, these lower three, and the large option as well should be checked. After you get all of that, click on continue. And this step of installing software will take some time. So just go grab a cup of coffee or take some snack, and I will see you in around 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, so after a long installation, here is another question. And it asks us, should we install the grub bootloader to the master boot record? First of all, what is grub? Well, grub bootloader is a software that loads Linux kernel. It is the first software that is started at system boot. Let us read what it asks us here. It seems that this new installation is the only operating system on this computer. If so, it should be safe to install the grub bootloader to the master boot record of your first hard drive. Warning: if the installer failed to detect another operating system that is present on your computer, modifying the master boot record will make that operating system temporarily unbootable, though grub can be manually configured later to boot it. We want to click here, yes. And you might be asking, wait Alexa, but I'm running other operating systems. I'm running macOS or Windows. Don't worry, remember, this is a virtual machine. It doesn't know about your main operating system. For this virtual machine, this is the only operating system that is being installed. So it is safe to select yes and proceed to the next step, rather than restarting the installation. Since we don't have any installation media, and this is probably referring to a USB drive in case you install an operating system over USB, and we installed it in virtual machine, so we can simply just click on continue. This will finish up the installation, and then it will reboot our machine and open up our Kali Linux desktop. Here it is, our virtual machine is starting up for the first time. Finally, here is our login screen to our Kali Linux machine. Here we want to input the username that we typed in during the installation, so in my case it is Mr. Hacker. And down here you want to input the password that you used during the installation. Then you can click on login. And here it is, our first hacking machine. Now, in case you're wondering why is it smaller screen, well, to fix that, in most cases you can simply just do this, lower the screen, and then enlarge it once again, and now it should be in full screen mode. In case this didn't work, don't worry, in the next video we're going to perform some of the checks of our virtual machine to check the internet connection, whether it is in full screen mode, and other things as well. So don't worry if your machine isn't in full screen mode, it will be after the next video. Okay, just a quick little update video that we do every time a new version of Kali Linux comes out. And a few days ago, on the 9th August 2022, we got a 2022.3 release of Kali Linux operating system. Now for this particular release, there are not many new things, so everything is pretty much the same. There are no changes at all compared to the previous version, except some minor changes that we can read about under this blog on the official Kali Linux page. So you can navigate to this 2022.3 release under the blog, and you can read about all the new things that they did inside this version. So they made a few changes for Kali for virtual machines. They added some new tools, so feel free to check out these tools if you want. And that would pretty much be about it. There are some other minor changes such as Kali ARM updates and Kali NetHunter updates, but nothing important for the course. So feel free, as I always advise, to install the newest version that you see on the official page. But just in case, if you want to install an older version or the version that we use in the course, you can go to the all.kali.org, and under the Kali images, you will see all the previous releases of Kali Linux, and you can feel free to download whichever one that you want. If we also take a look at the Kali Linux 2022.3 inside VirtualBox, there are not many changes compared to the previous version. Matter of fact, I don't see any change. The wallpaper looks the same. Everything visual looks the same. So we can say it's rather similar to the previous release. Nonetheless, let's not waste any more time. Once again, if you want to read about the new release, go to this article. And if you don't want to, that's okay. You can feel free to proceed to the next lecture. See you there. Alright, we got our hacking machine running and ready to use. Before we get to explaining all of the stuff you see on the screen, first we need to make sure our machine is working properly. So we'll just go through a few checks. The first check that we want to do is your machine in full screen mode? Now, in the previous tutorial, I showed you what you can do to get it in full screen mode, and all you need to do is minimize this screen and maximize it once again, in case it already wasn't in full screen mode. And that is because newest versions of Kali Linux automatically set your machine to be in full screen mode without installing any additional tools for that. Usually, this trick should work. And if it didn't work and your machine is still not in full screen mode, then we need to install something called VirtualBox Guest Additions. And I would advise all of you to do it even if you already have a full screen mode machine, because guest additions will not only help us with getting our machine to be full screen, but they will also make our machine run smoother and better. In previous versions of Kali Linux, we always had to install VirtualBox Guest Additions to get the full screen mode, so let us see how we can do that in the newest version as well. First we need to do is we need to go up here and click on Devices, then navigate down to the Insert Guest Addition CD image and click on that. They should get imported, and in just a few seconds we should see a disk icon on our desktop. If we double click it, it will open a folder where we will see a bunch of files and other directories. Don't worry, we don't need to know what each of these files are or what do they do. The only thing we need to remember is the path to where these files are. And up here we can see that these files are located at /media/cd-rom0. So let us copy this. If we right click, copy. Now comes the fun part. We have to open something called terminal. And terminal is something that we will use for the entire course. It is the most important tool you need to master as a hacker. But for now, just follow what I do, and we will explain things as we go. To open a terminal, right-click on your desktop and click on Open Terminal here. It will open this window where we can execute our commands. And once again, since terminal is an important tool that you must master and learn from scratch, we will cover it in the next section in greater details. For now on, we just want to install VirtualBox Guest Additions. The first thing that we want to do is we want to navigate to that path that we copied. And to do that using terminal, we must use a command called cd. This cd command stands for changing directories, and you can see that we are currently on the desktop directory, which says right here. To change the directory, we type the cd command and then we paste the path where we want to go. So change directory /media/cd-rom. Press enter and you will see that in the next line we will be changing directories to the desired folder. Now, to list all the files inside of this directory, we need to type another command which is called ls. What this command stands for is simply just listing the contents of the current directory. So you can just remember ls to be a short command for list. If I press here enter, we will see a bunch of the files that are located in the current directory. These files are actually the files that we saw once we opened these VirtualBox Guest Additions. You can see these are the same files. Right now we are just there inside of our terminal. And out of all of these files, now we must run one of them. Can you guess which one? We know that we can't run the exe files since those are aimed for Windows systems and we are on a Linux system. But we can, however, run this one called VirtualBox linuxadditions.run. If you guessed that one, congrats! This is the one that we will run. To run it, we can use a command that says sh virtualbox linuxadditions.run. And this sh is just a way for us to actually run this file, which we are also going to explain once we get to explaining terminal in greater details. For now on, if we press enter, this program must be ran with administrator privileges, aborting. For now, don't think about this and just run the following command: sudo sh virtualbox linux additions.run. If we press enter here, you should get a prompt like this asking you for your password. Then type in your password, and keep in mind that even while you're typing, you will not be able to see anything appear right here, which doesn't mean that you're not typing. You are typing, just it doesn't show anything inside of the terminal. Once you typed in the password, click enter, and it will ask us, do we want to continue with the installation? We want to specify right here yes, and it will start the process of installing VirtualBox guest additions. Now, you will notice that this entire process will be performed automatically. We do not need to do anything anymore. This will install on its own. And don't worry if there is a part of this entire process that you did not understand. We will discuss all of these commands and tools later on. This installation right here will take a minute or two, so let us just wait for that to finish. Okay, so it has finished, and we can see right here that it tells us running kernel modules will not be replaced until the system is restarted. What this simply means is that this installation will not have any effect until we reboot or restart our machine. So there are two ways that we can do that. You can either go in right corner right here, click on this and click on restart, or you can do it in the cool way using terminal. So if I cancel here and go back to my terminal and type the command back from Google, that means we can access the internet. So let's check it out. Type ping google.com, and here it is. We're getting responses back. Great, we can access the internet. To stop this, we must press Ctrl+C. As we can see right here, 21 packets transmitted, 21 received, and 0% packet loss. But even though we can access the internet, I want to point one thing out. If we go to settings of our virtual machine, and we select the virtual machine, navigate to settings, and from the settings navigate to network settings, we will notice that we're attached to NAT, and what NAT is a network address translation. This means that the IP address that our Kali Linux machine has will be given to us by a VirtualBox. So if I go to my Kali Linux and in the terminal type sudo ifconfig, press enter, enter my password, here we will see that we got the IP address of 10.0.2.15. And this is the IP address given to us by VirtualBox. Since this can present us a problem later on, we want our IP address to be received from our DHCP or from our router. And before I show you how to do that, I want to point out why this could present us a problem. Well, this IP address right here does not belong to the IP range of my local area network. If I go to my Windows machine and open up command prompt to check out the IP address on my physical machine, I can type right here ipconfig, and I will see right here that the IP address that my physical machine has starts with 192.168.1. And this is not the same IP range. It starts with 10.0.2. So I want to change this to start as my physical machine with 192.168.1. To do that, my Kali Linux must receive the IP address from my router. And for all of you Mac users, you can also type in ifconfig in your terminal on your Mac. Basically, you can check the IP address of your Mac the same way that we did inside of our Kali Linux. by typing ifconfig. And all we need to do to change this IP address is go to the network settings and switch from NAT to bridged adapter. This will automatically set my bridged adapter and my adapter to be this one, since this is the only one I have. And since I'm connecting over cable connection, I want to go to the advanced and check right here, cable connected. You can select your adapter right here, and once you do, click on OK. Just one more thing before we click on OK. In case your wireless adapter is not working in Kali Linux, since there are some wireless adapters that are not supported by Kali Linux yet, keep in mind that the cable connection will always work. So if your wireless adapter doesn't work, just switch the adapter to cable connection and then press on OK. Now that we changed this, if I go back to my Kali Linux machine and run the same command, which is sudo ifconfig, now it starts with 192.168.1. And keep in mind that for you it might start differently. It doesn't have to start with these three numbers. It might be something like 192.168.0, or it might be something like 10.1.1 or 10.0.1. It depends on your network. So now we can see that both of these IP addresses are starting the same. Okay, great. Now that we went through both of the checks for the full screen and network connection, in the next few lectures, we can proceed to get more familiar with the Kali Linux environment and hackers terminology. See you there. Welcome back. In the last lecture, we talked about configuring our Kali Linux network settings to have internet connection inside of our Kali Linux machine. Now let's see whether that is set properly, and in case it isn't, let's see what we can do to get network connectivity within our Kali Linux machine. So, a quick reminder, last lecture we selected our Kali Linux machine, we went on settings, we went on network settings, and we chose bridged adapter for our Kali Linux machine. Now, to check whether that works, we can type once again ifconfig inside of our terminal that we can open icon, and under the ETH0 interface, we should get our IPv4 address that should belong to our network's IP range. If you're not getting any packets back from Google or you're not getting any packets back from Google or any other website or IP address, then we have to change our network settings. So go back to VirtualBox window, select your virtual machine or your Kali Linux machine, go to settings, and another option that we can go besides bridged adapter, in case bridged adapter doesn't work, so always go first with bridged adapter, but in case it doesn't work, we want to go with NAT network. So don't confuse it with NAT. We are not choosing just NAT, we want to choose NAT network. And here you will notice that we don't have NAT network selected. That is because we haven't created one yet. But before we create it, let's just quickly explain what NAT network is. Essentially, NAT network allows us to have a separate network where our virtual machine will be connected to, and later on, once we create multiple virtual machines, we can put several different virtual machines onto the same NAT network, and they will be able to communicate with one another. If we just leave it on NAT, which is default, then our virtual machine will most likely have internet connection, but it will not be able to communicate with machines inside of our network. Okay, if we select NAT network, let's click on cancel first so we can create it. And to create the NAT network, we want to click on Tools, we want to click on Preferences, we want to go to Network, and here, under the NAT networks, we want to click on this plus sign, which will generate the NAT network for us. If I double click it, it will also give us the information about the NAT network, and if you want, you can change certain things right here, such as whether you support IPv6, or you want to change the range of your network. It doesn't matter, the network name, it's all up to you. I will just leave all of this on default and I will click on OK. I will also click on OK here, and all I have to do is go back to settings of my Kali Linux virtual machine, go back to the network settings and switch from bridged adapter to NAT network, and now you will see that under the name we have our NAT network selected. Once I click OK, it will save the settings. I will now reboot my virtual machine.